diving, drowning you. The stripes, your eyes, your voice.
We're going to get going here in just a minute. .5 FM, Richmond's Public Radio. I'm Tyler Smith, host of Keeping It Real with Tyler Smith Sports Talk Show, Sports Talk Podcast. Today we got a full slate for you guys coming here to you live from Weeside 91.5 FM in Richmond, Indiana, Richmond's Public Radio. I'm Tyler Smith. It's 4:01. The weather outside, man, it's a little bit of a cold one out there. 18 degrees, kind of cloudy, a little bit breezy, so stay warm out there. It's going to get colder throughout the night and throughout the entire weekend here going on. But the NFL slowing down this week. It's Pro Bowl weekend, so not too much going on. You got the Super Bowl coming up next week. Last weekend, we had the AFC Championship games. And to be honest, now it's kind of the slow season a little bit, or that slow week, if you know what I mean. We're just trying to get through it, get going to the Super Bowl, just trying to stay alive this week. This week, really what happens a lot is a bunch of off-season talk, off-season moves. We're looking ahead to free agency, trying to see what's going on out there. And today, that's what we're going to do. Throughout the first hour, we're going to recap the conference championship games from last weekend between the Chiefs and the Bengals, the Eagles and the 49ers. And then we're going to move on and a little bit of a preview of the Kansas City Chiefs taking on the Philadelphia Eagles in the Super Bowl out there in Arizona. But then we're going to move on into free agency in the second hour for the most part, talking about what should these teams do? What's the head coaching search look like? We're going to talk about the Colts and what they should do. Should they trade up? Should they trade down? Is Jeff Saturday going to be the next head coach? Who knows? As well, we're talking about what's going to go on around the league. What needs to be done with these teams? What trades can really shake up the league? But to start off the show today, we're going to talk about Tom Brady, the GOAT. If you didn't hear yesterday, Wednesday the 1st, Tom Brady retired, quote unquote, for good, according to Tom Brady. Tom Brady has been a guy, love him or hate him, he was great. You have to acknowledge that at least. And a lot of people out there have very mixed feelings about the man, but I love that guy. Throughout my childhood, throughout my life growing up, he was doing everything, man. I just grew up watching Tom Brady throwing the ball around, leading his team to championships, leading his team to winning seasons in New England, and then for the last little bit in Tampa Bay. And it felt like a little part of me died the other day when I heard that Tom Brady was retiring. Last year, I didn't cover the story. I didn't talk about it. We did a show, but we said we're not talking about Tom Brady because I had that gut feeling Tom Brady was coming back. I love Tom Brady, and I didn't think he wanted to go out. But now, it seems like he's going away for good, unfortunately. I would love to see him come back. Talking around people, some of my sources, they know, it seems very likely that Tom Brady is not coming back next year. But it also, you can't believe it until September, October, when the training camp's done. We're in the regular season, and Tom Brady is not on a football team. You just have to wait until then. But for now, it seems like Tom Brady is done. He's stepping away. I wish he would have went out on a better slate, a better notice, and a better ending, a little bit more of a storybook ending. You want to see a storybook ending for someone as great as Tom Brady. You want to see him go out on top like Peyton Manning did. You want to see him go out with a better season, just not getting dismantled by the Dallas Cowboys at home for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But it's a shame. Unfortunately, he's walking away. And to be honest, you can't blame the guy. He's been in the league longer than I've been alive. And I love that man. He's been in the NFL 23 seasons. I just turned 21 the other day. This was my quote-unquote birthday present hearing Tom Brady retiring. And it was not a pleasant birthday present, to say the least. Tom Brady finished this year, you wouldn't say at the top of his game, but also he's not at the bottom of the league either. By Tom Brady standards, maybe a down year, you'd think. But throughout the NFL, tied 14th among quarterbacks with his 77.5 PFF grade. Pro Football Focus, their new analytics company, they're growing a lot. And really, you need to be taking a look at them for those deep dive analytics and things like that. His highest grade, in 2006, he produced a 98.4 PFF grade. And that just comes down to just being elite. Are you a good quarterback? What are you doing right? Are you doing the correct things on the field? Is this pass, should it be completed? Did you complete it? Did this pass, you throw this ball, man, no one should catch that. That should never be a complete pass, but you do it more than someone else. All those things are accumulated in this PFF grade. The PFF grade is kind of my go-to rather than looking at QBR and quarterback rating, things like that. There's a lot of different skewed statistics out there, but nonetheless, Tom Brady, if you look at any of those, had a good season. Was it a Tom Brady peak season? No, it was not, but it was still a pretty good season for Tom Brady. This year as well, a little bit surprising. Everybody says, he's going to get older. He can't hit the deep ball. He was tied 14th among quarterbacks this year with 36 big-time throws. And, that's big time. That's big time. When you hear big-time throws, he was ranked fourth in the league in big-time throws. That means stepping up in a big moment, throwing the deep ball, hitting the right play, making the right play. And Tom Brady, he's going out, man. He's going out as a 7-time Super Bowl winner, 5 Super Bowl MVPs, 3 league MVPs, and he's certainly going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Certainly going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. This man had 3 separate Hall of Fame careers. Field Yates tweeted out a very similar tweet last year, but he tweeted it out again this year. And I'm going to read it off for you here. Tom Brady in his 20s. 21,564 passing yards, 147 passing touchdowns, and 3 Super Bowl wins. That is a quarterback going in the Hall of Fame just in his 20s. That is a quarterback Hall of Fame resume. 3 Super Bowl wins, 147 passing touchdowns, 21,000 plus passing yards. It's absurd. That's going into the Hall of Fame. And then you have to account for as well, when Tom Brady was younger, he did that QB sneak a whole lot more. I'm sure he has a handful of rushing touchdowns mixed in there as well. Tom Brady in his 30s, 40,000 passing yards, 309 passing touchdowns, and 2 Super Bowl wins. It's pretty remarkable. That is another Hall of Fame resume. And now, in Tom Brady's 40s, 27,632 passing yards, 193 passing touchdowns, and 2 Super Bowl wins. That is a Hall of Fame resume in each decade, no matter how you look at it. Tom Brady, throughout his career, was always a top 5 quarterback in the league, no matter what. No matter what, he was a top 5 quarterback. When you take a look at him, there's other people that are saying, I don't know if I want Tom Brady because he's not as mobile. He's not as this. He's not as that. Trust me, that man is that in all of it. It's just the way he works, the way he goes, something about him ticked differently than other guys in the NFL. The TB12 method, eating the avocado ice cream. Everybody makes a joke about it. Everybody's memeing him for it, but he's eating the avocado ice cream. He's doing all the plyometrics, doing all this, doing all the next gen stuff, doing all the next phase this, the weird stuff that no one does. But it works for him. It worked for him, and it prolonged his career. It allowed this man to play in the NFL longer than I've been alive. It allowed this man to play in the NFL for 23 years. And not only play in the NFL for 23 years, but played the most important position in the NFL for 23 years. And I know the league's gotten different over the years. Got a little softer on quarterbacks as of late, but he still played through multiple different eras for 23 years and dominated. That's the key word here, dominated. Tom Brady, whenever he stepped on a football field or when he was a quarterback of a team, that team was instantly put into the conversation of potential to win the Super Bowl. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Tom Brady's teams were always around. The 28-3 comeback against the Atlanta Falcons. I remember myself a couple years ago, back at home, a kid, high school, junior high, watching that game. House full of family and friends watching this game. And I remember my old man coming up to me. He's like, hey, what do you think? What's going on here? He said, are they done? And I was kind of just shrugged. And I was like, well, it's Tom Brady. Can't count him out. He's got a chance, and I bet he'll do it. That was also me being a little young, naive kid, an absolute Tom Brady fan, Tom Brady stan, just like I want the guy to succeed, and I'll do it blindly. But if that was any other quarterback, we all would have been like, no way. Not happening. But Tom Brady did that. Tom Brady did that. And what's wild about Tom Brady as well, he wasn't driven by just wanting to be the greatest football player of all time. Julian Edelman said it recently in an interview and talking about Tom Brady. You know, Julian Edelman, he remembers going, I believe their third Super Bowl ring. He's like, hey, let's get one more than so-and-so, you know, so you can be like the all-time winning Super Bowl quarterback. I believe it was Joe Montana. And Tom Brady replied with an expletive that I can't say, but it's a 4-letter word, sounds like fire truck, and ended up saying, no, I'm going after Michael Jordan. He wants 5. He wants 6 rings. You know, he wants to be the best, and he got that 7th ring. Tom Brady arguably has solidified himself as arguably one of the greatest athletes of all time, not even just in football. That's why everyone calls him the GOAT. He is arguably better than every single other athlete in the world, and he did it for 23 years. And he did it with the most improbable storyline as well. Pick 199, if I remember correctly. Counted out. Wasn't a starting quarterback as a freshman at the University of Michigan. Had to win the job and work his way up. Tom Brady, legitimately, it's circling around circles now, coming out on LinkedIn and some of these other places. Tom Brady made a resume. He had a resume put together when he was applying for jobs during the NFL Combine season because he didn't think he was going to get drafted or he didn't think he was going to last in the NFL. Because that was the real truth there. There's a realistic possibility that Tom Brady never made it to the NFL or was just a 1 or 2 year quarterback who gets cut and then has to go work as a businessman, an insurance agent, whatever that is, you know, has to pick up a different profession. He turned that improbable storyline into the greatest career of all time. It's absurd. The man, this entire season, you know, is going around and not even just this season, but even throughout the years past, playing against people who grew up watching him, who grew up as like, oh, that's my favorite player in the NFL. And now I'm going against that man. I'm on the same field as him. It's a daunting task. We think some of the craziest events out there, Ken Griffey Jr. playing with his dad, Ken Griffey Sr., or LeBron trying to stay in the league, which he will, to play with Bronny. The biggest kicker there is, will Bronny make the league? And I'm sure he will. But we think about those as some of the greatest sporting feats of all time. Tom Brady played in the NFL for 23 years. And there's a stat that came out with the amount of playoffs games Tom Brady played, it would account for like 2 or 3 more seasons in the NFL. It just shows the sustained amount of greatness that Tom Brady was able to achieve. Tom Brady played in 48 playoff games throughout his entire career. So if you just think about the 16-game season, that's 3 more years of NFL. So that's 26 seasons, technically, if you think about it. 26 technical seasons of the NFL. If you want to get nitpicky, because we got the 17-game season now, 18-week season, cut 1 year off. But that man played for so long at a high, high level. And the story, it wasn't gifted to him. That's what you have to think about. We have these quarterbacks who are the number 1 pick. They step in right away. You know, they're deemed for greatness all the way. Tom Brady wasn't that guy. He was not the supposed to be hero. He was never written in as the hero in the script. He shouldn't have been the hero. But he became more than a hero. He became the greatest of all time. And that is absolutely remarkable. And that is why Tom Brady is often thought about in such a high light. And everyone hates Tom Brady. You either love him or you hate him, as I mentioned earlier. They hate him because of how good he was. There's not a single thing this man has done off the field that could lead towards hate. He's done it throughout his entire career at the highest level. The only negative throughout his entire career could be this season when it got a little ugly. He went through a little public divorce. He went through the divorce. That got a little ugly. Stories started coming out. Stories started flying. He started missing a couple of training camps. But the man was in the league for 22 seasons at that point, going in year 23, and life hit him. You know, he's a 45-year-old man. Things are going to happen. and he needed to take care of some things. But he still showed up and put in the work and was a top quarterback in this league, even with all that nonsense going on. Still showed up every day and tried to dominate and get better every single day. And it is so hard. Think about your 9 to 5. Going in every day, I need to get better. I need to do this better every single day for 23 years. And then you know you're the best for 15 of those years at least, and you still need to find ways to get better. It's tough. It's a mental grind. It's a mental block. And that's what Tom Brady was able to do. He was able to dominate for 23 seasons in the NFL over his entire career. I know he didn't start his rookie year, but he was able to play in a span of 23 seasons, grinding to get better. And it's commendable. It's remarkable. So to Tom Brady, I just want to say thank you. And now that you guys just got my 15-minute rant on Tom Brady, we're going to shift gears into the Bengals and Chiefs, Eagles, 49ers, and we're going to dive into the Eagles 49ers game first because this is how we're going to roll. They played first. They got that earlier game, and there's a little bit of less of a story here in comparison to the Bengals and Kansas City Chiefs. So when we take a look here, Philadelphia Eagles destroyed the 49ers 31-7, but the box score doesn't really tell the whole story, if you ask me. Philadelphia Eagles are heading to the Super Bowl. Shout out Jalen Hurts. You know, a guy played at Alabama, started as a freshman, SEC Player of the Year, and then gets benched halfway through a national title game. And is the best teammate ever. It is the first person to celebrate with Tua Tagovailoa when he throws an absolute bomb in the backcourt to Devontae Smith. And then we swing gears, and you now have him at Oklahoma. He's in the Heisman conversation with Lincoln Riley. And then he becomes drafted, I believe it was in the second round. And the Eagles pick him up. Looks a little shaky as a rookie, but ends up stepping in the shoes and growing, and he's going to get paid this summer. But the storyline here, shout out to the Eagles for getting in, but the story is the San Francisco 49ers. That is such a horrible, horrible way to go out. The 49ers had the best defense in the NFL, looked dominant throughout the year without their starting quarterback, Trey Lance, without their backup quarterback, Jimmy Garoppolo. And then you have Mr. Irrelevant Brock Purdy step in, and he plays phenomenal. And then Brock Purdy in this game gets his elbow more or less snapped in a sense. UCL injury, massive UCL injury. And if you guys don't know what the UCL injury is, Tommy John surgery for the quarterback here. Early in this game, he's dropping back in the pocket about to throw, and the Eagles defensive end comes through and just gets his elbow and just stretches it back. It's a fumble. Eagles get the ball, but he destroys his elbow. Then Josh Johnson comes in. Josh Johnson has played in every single football league in America, it seems. Just a guy who's grinding. He gets cut. He gets a new team. He's just a football guy. And he gets his opportunity in the playoffs with the 49ers. And you have to think, wow, what a story. This is going to be his time with the 49ers team. He could go to the Super Bowl with this team. But instead, he gets a concussion. And now we're left with a scenario. Do you put Brock Purdy back in the game? Or do you put a position player at quarterback? Because the 49ers have 0 quarterbacks left on their roster healthy. Jimmy Garoppolo was going to be questionable for next weekend if the 49ers made it to the Super Bowl, so he wasn't available. Trey Lance, season-ending injury. So Brock Purdy or Christian McCaffrey. The 49ers opt to put McCaffrey in at Wildcat quarterback, and he even throws a pass. It's not completed. It was a little ugly. But what do you expect? The guy's a running back. And he tried to put the team on his back and keep him in. He 15 carries, 84 rushing yards. And then 57 of those rushing yards after contact, got a touchdown, and he even played quarterback. But then the 49ers put Brock Purdy back in the game to play quarterback, but he couldn't throw. The guy could not throw with his arm. So he ended up just having to run the ball every play and hand it off to somebody. So the 49ers just had to get creative and hope for the best. And it just wasn't going their way. It wasn't going to happen. So this game was a little underwhelming in a sense. Because you got to think, you want to see these guys play. You want to see the best of the best in the NFC Championship game. leading up to the Super Bowl. You want to see best on best and good on good. But unfortunately, we didn't get that in this game. The Eagles were able to dominate. Brock Purdy only threw 4 passes in this one, 23 yards. Josh Johnson, 7 of 13, 74 yards. And then McCaffrey just tried to put his team on the back, 15 carries, 84 yards, and a touchdown. Just try to put the team on his back and hope for the best, but unfortunately, injuries were too much. A reporter even went to the extreme of asking George Kittle, hey, how does it lose knowing you didn't have a quarterback? Like, you don't ask the question. We all know it's horrible. It's a silly question to ask, but unfortunately, the 49ers season comes to an end at the hands of the Eagles, but more or less to the hands of their own downfall with injuries and their own health concerns. But the Eagles still get the job done. It's not like the game was given to them. They still had to show up and play. With Jalen Hurts, 15 of 25, 121 yards. He does well. And then you have Miles Sanders going out there for another 40-plus game. 2 touchdowns. Jalen Hurts getting a rushing touchdown. And a massive play early on in this one. A big ball going on to the left-hand sideline. Jalen Hurts drops back, throws the ball to Devontae Smith. I think it was a 4th down or a big-time 3rd down conversion. I want to say it was a 4th down. And Devontae Smith goes up and snags this thing one-handed. Replay shows that it should not have been ruled as a catch. Eagles hurry up. They get the ball snapped before we can get to the review. But nonetheless, the Eagles played well in this one. The Eagles' offensive line showed great. The Eagles' offensive line faced the best defense they'll face in the playoffs, but as well in the Super Bowl. The 49ers defense is significantly better than the Kansas City Chiefs defense. So that's what we have going on now. And what helps the Eagles here is they get a couple weeks. Jalen Hurts can get healthy. He's had that shoulder issue. He's played through it. I'd say he's nearing 100%, but he will definitely get to 100% now that he's able to recover a bit more with this extended break. But the same thing goes for the Kansas City Chiefs as we switch gears. The Kansas City Chiefs defeat the Cincinnati Bengals 23-20 at Arrowhead Stadium. And this one hurts. This one hurts for all Cincinnati Bengals fans out there. The Cincinnati Bengals and Kansas City Chiefs all week long talking trash, doing things. The Cincinnati mayor put out a video, if you haven't seen it, put out a video asking for Joe Burrow to take a paternity test to see if he was Patrick Mahomes' father, which is a bit outlandish, but he did it nonetheless. But Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes are 2 of the best young quarterbacks in this league. You can imagine that these 2 guys are going to be like the Peyton Manning, Tom Brady of this era, but you just don't know how it's going to shake out. But it very well could be. Burrow made 2 big-time throws in this one, while Mahomes only made 1 kind of big-time throw that I think of. But what impressed me the most about Patrick Mahomes in this one was his ability to stay in the pocket and perform. Patrick Mahomes has a massive ankle injury, high ankle sprain that he's been going through. And you might be asking, like, oh, Tyler, like, he had to stay in the pocket. Why was that impressive? Because Patrick Mahomes is normally a guy who has to be mobile, has to move around a bit more. And he ended up not moving around at all, really. He only made 1 big run, and there was the controversial call there at the end of the game. I don't think it was that controversial. I think it was a foul. It was definitely an unnecessary roughness, a late hit, but it shouldn't have happened. The Bengals should not have been put in that situation, in my personal thoughts. But Patrick Mahomes stepped up and played big in this one. He sat in the pocket and he played. He was a pocket passer to the extreme. And he did amazing. But one of the X factors in this one was Chiefs defensive tackle, nose tackle, Chris Jones. Was absolutely dominating and an absolute pain for the Cincinnati Bengals. The Kansas City Chiefs defense kind of took a notebook page from the Los Angeles Rams last year and Sean McVay on how they used Aaron Donald in blitz and pass in pass coverage where, he's going to try and fake out sometimes and then slip back into the pocket and try and get a sack. It was just Chris Jones was a dominant force in this game. He notched 7 pressures in this one. He was just a dominant force. He pressured Joe Burrow 7 to 10 times in there. That 7 pressures to me seems a little low because I felt almost every single play I was sitting there, I'm like, man, Chris Jones is going to get after Joe Burrow if he doesn't get rid of it. But Chris Jones ended up having a 90-plus rated performance and was the highest graded player in this game. And that takes a lot to be the highest graded player as a defensive tackle. You often see quarterbacks get this, or a wide receiver, who maybe has a massive multi-touchdown game, not a defensive tackle or a nose tackle. That shows you how dominant and impressive Chris Jones was in this one. Trent McDuffie and Jalen Watson stepped up in the defensive backfield, which was extremely impressive, and stepped up in coverage. And those are some guys that have gotten kind of destroyed by the Bengals in the past. I hate to say that for my Kansas City Chiefs fans, but it is nothing from the truth. But Patrick Mahomes, that's the story we see here. Patrick Mahomes and Chris Jones just dominant performances in this one. Joe Burrow, 26 of 41, 270 yards, 6.6 yards per attempt, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. Those 2 interceptions definitely changed the game. The Bengals do not fare well when Joe Burrow turns the ball over more than 2 times in the game. And that's what hurts. But then you have Patrick Mahomes on the other side of this thing, 29 of 43, 326 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, and 1 massive run. On the rushing side of things, Joe Burrow, 4 of 30, long of 14, got out there in a couple plays when the pocket was just kind of held up on a couple of those. Pocket was held up, but the Chiefs dropped everybody back in coverage, and nothing was going on. Burrow just had to take off and gain a couple yards. Whereas on the other side of Kansas City Chiefs, Isaiah Pacheco, Jarrett McKinnon played well. I think Isaiah Pacheco is someone to watch out for in the Super Bowl because Isaiah Pacheco is a hard-running running back. He's going to get up the field. He's going to be a very influential player in the Super Bowl. Don't expect him to have a ton of yards. That's not how he plays. He only had 26 yards in this one. But I think Pacheco is going to be crucial on some of the short yardage situations. And that's where I think he's going to come into play a lot. Just hammering the ball up the middle on a 3rd and 1, a 3rd and 2. So the Chiefs can start airing it out. Or maybe on a 2nd and 1. Things like that. Short yardage situations when the Kansas City Chiefs need to run the ball. He's going to be a dominant force. But he's going to have to step up to the test and step up to the challenge and the task against that stifling Eagles defense. But what's kind of scary here when we talk Kansas City Chiefs, Cincinnati Bengals, is a recent story surrounding Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon recently was charged with, I want to say, menacing. I'm not too sure what the actual term is here. But Joe Mixon is in some deep trouble. Because Joe Mixon had filed a charge against him because he was apparently waving a gun in the face of another individual. The story's a little gray out there. It's not as clear, but it's not sure what's kind of going on here. So it's just not a good look for the Cincinnati Bengals. Just not a good look. And all this is alleged at the moment, so don't be taking this as fact, but this is what's coming out from a lot of insiders around the NFL, a lot of reporters and a lot of journalists throughout the Cincinnati area who do a lot of legal trouble stories. And this is one that's been picked up by a lot of people. Obviously, we hope for the right thing to happen to this. We hope no one was hurt. We hope everybody's okay. And we hope the right side of this thing kind of comes out on top. But it's definitely something to keep an eye out, especially as the Bengals are looking at the offseason here. Joe Mixon could be someone who gets cut based on the salary cap number or gets traded. So this is obviously something for the Cincinnati Bengals to take a deep dive and think about throughout the offseason in the coming weeks, because you don't want to have people who are distractions like this on your team sometimes, especially if it's as bad as what some people are making it out to be, allegedly. Now we're going to kind of slide gears over as we hit 4:30 p.m. on this beautiful Friday. We're going to be talking Super Bowl 57. We're talking about the matchup, Chiefs, Eagles. An interesting note, Kansas City Chiefs are going to be wearing white, and the Eagles are going to be wearing their green. And of late and historically, the teams who wear white jerseys or the lighter colored jersey in the Super Bowl have a significantly higher winning percentage. But to note, the last time the Eagles did win the Super Bowl, they were wearing their green jerseys, the Philly Special, Nick Foles. Carson Wentz was hurt, so Nick Foles steps in and gets the job done. So the Eagles might be superstitious themselves, but the stats out there, I'm not sure how that's going to affect the game. It's one of those silly stats, as we mentioned, how we're just looking for a stat to be a stat. It's definitely one of those, but definitely something to keep your eye out and just food for thought more than anything. But the Philadelphia Eagles and Kansas City Chiefs probably give us one of the top matchups, you have to say. You know, I would have been happy with Bengals, Eagles, Bengals 49ers, or Chiefs 49ers, things like that. But with the injuries that happened with the 49ers, if they end up coming on top, would have been kind of a sad game to watch, because you just would have had the fifth string quarterback, almost fifth string quarterbacks playing for the 49ers. And it just would have not been the best game ever. So as an NFL fan, I can appreciate this game, but I do wish my Cincinnati Bengals were in this game, though, nonetheless. But the Super Bowl 57 is going to be a good one. The quarterbacks, as we mentioned earlier, Joe there. Mahomes has been the higher graded quarterback this year by PFF, and he's been the better passer as well. But you have to remember, Jalen Hurts is the much better rusher of the two. Patrick Mahomes is a little bit more turnover prone than Jalen Hurts, so that could come into play in this one, as the Eagles' defense is quite dominant. Well, as we mentioned earlier, the big question is going to be about Patrick Mahomes and his ankle heading into this one. That high ankle sprain normally takes about 4 to 6 weeks. High ankle sprains are no fun. I've never suffered one, but I've had teammates in the past, and I know other guys throughout the NFL and the other leagues around the world who suffer from these injuries, and they are detrimental, and they hurt you for quite some time. So you can tape it up and do what you want, but it's still going to be hurting. So that's got to be a big concern for the Kansas City Chiefs. But you got to give the edge in the quarterback position to the Eagles. Not to the Eagles, but to the... A lot of people are going to say the edge is going to go to the Chiefs with Mahomes. But I'm going to Eagles here on the edge with Jalen Hurts. I like Jalen Hurts more than Mahomes. And it's kind of a silly, like, why you like Jalen Hurts. Mahomes is obviously better. Jalen Hurts is hungry. He has a chip on him, chip on that shoulder. He's just a guy who wants to succeed. And I'm not saying Mahomes doesn't, but look at Jalen Hurts' track record. Alabama, dominant. He gets benched for a bad half. He flips, goes to Oklahoma, and has a Heisman-worthy season. I like something about Jalen Hurts, coach's kid, a grinder, and someone seeking their first Super Bowl victory. And the reason why I'm going to give the Eagles the edge in this was that defense. The Eagles' defense is quite dominant and stifling. The Philadelphia Eagles are dominant. The Chiefs struggled against the Cincinnati Bengals defense. And I'm telling you, the Eagles defense is significantly better than the Cincinnati Bengals defense. Philadelphia Eagles throughout this entire season are one of the best statistically of all time. You know, you have to take back and look of late. They're one of the best defenses of late that we have seen. On defense, the names you got to watch out for is Hassan Reddick. Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat. Fletcher Cox is a bigger star. He's going to be influential in the run game and stopping the run game. But Hassan Reddick's the guy to watch out for. Hassan Reddick is going to get a sack in this one. He's going to get multiple sacks in this one. He's going to be an influential player. Hassan Reddick is going to be dangerous in this one. He's one of those players that you just need to know about, something you need to watch for, because he's unreal. Just the way he's been playing, he was influential and dominant in the game against the 49ers. And if I remember correctly, he's the one who had the sack on Brock Purdy that ended up injuring him. Obviously, I'm not saying that Hassan Reddick went out of the way to injure Brock Purdy by any means, but he was influential in that game by rushing the passer quite consistently. Versus the 49ers, he had 2 sacks and 1 forced fumble. The game before that versus the Giants in the playoffs, 1.5 sacks. He's just a guy who's going to be mixing it up. In their 2 playoff games, 8 tackles, 3.5 sacks in 2 games. He's someone that the Kansas City Chiefs must worry about significantly in this one. And then you also have to remember the Eagles have 2 great corners. Darius Slay is an absolute stud in this league. Darius Slay is going to have a field day. I think he's going to be influential. He's going to take the number 1 receiver of the Kansas City Chiefs wherever they go. And to be honest, I think Darius Slay is better than all the weapons that the Chiefs have. The most influential weapon that they have is going to be Travis Kelce. But I think Darius Slay is efficient enough and good enough to take away a receiver, take away a side of the field even almost. And then you have to remember that the Eagles have C.J. Gardner-Johnson in the slot. He's a nickel corner. He's played a little bit of sub linebacker. He's a guy who's going to mix it up in this one. They got him in a trade from the Saints. And honestly, looking back at it, the Saints got robbed. The Saints gave him away for nothing. The Saints truly gave him away for nothing. And that's just on the defensive side of things. It's going to be something to watch out for. And you have James Bradberry as well. A name that most of you guys won't know. He's not a big, flashy player, not a guy who's a household name by any means. But James Bradberry is an elite number 2 corner. He has 3 interceptions on the season, 17 pass deflections, which is 3rd in the NFL. That's something to look out for. 17 pass deflections and pass breakups. And versus the 49ers, he did very well. Did very well in coverage. In their moments, he was tested because you have to remember the 49ers didn't really throw the ball a lot due to the circumstances, but he did well when tested. And that's going to be a concern if you think about it for the Eagles. You weren't tested a lot in the pass game, but I wouldn't worry about it too much. That might be a story, you see start developing next week. But that's what I want to be stressing about or worrying over. The Eagles defense is going to be quite dominant in this one. Then when you flip the script and look at the offensive side of things, as we mentioned a moment ago, Jalen Hurts, a great quarterback. He's going to do well. I'm excited to see how he plays in his first Super Bowl appearance. He's my prediction for Super Bowl MVP as well. Miles Sanders, a veteran running back, one of the best fantasy backs in the NFL this year. You have A.J. Brown, wide receiver of the Tennessee Titans formerly that the Philadelphia Eagles traded for on draft night, and that move keeps looking better every single day. The Philadelphia Eagles went out and traded for a star wide receiver, a true number 1 wide receiver, and they got him. And he's done well. They've won that trade, and that's an example of someone going out and getting somebody to win. And I love that. Team's committed to winning. Who cares about the draft picks? Just let me get a star, and that's what they did. The Titans ended up drafting Treylon Burks with the pick, who they're saying could be like A.J. Brown. But why get a could be when you could have it? And then wide receiver 2 is Devontae Smith. Devontae Smith, if you remember, dominant wide receiver at Alabama. Devontae Smith was influential in their championship run, their national championship run at Alabama. He was just something fun to watch, the way they use him. And Devontae Smith won the Heisman as well. And I know we're not talking college football, but winning the Heisman as a wide receiver is quite the tall task, especially here in the modern era. And then you'll get the tight end, Dallas Goedert. Most of you guys won't know him, but he's definitely a top 10 tight end in this league. Dallas Goedert, a good vertical threat, a good run blocking personnel tight end as well. When you add him to arguably the best offensive line in the NFL, if you're going to say if it's not the best, you're talking the 49ers is probably the best offensive line, but this is 1A, 1B in my personal opinion, and I got the Eagles as 1A. The Philadelphia Eagles are coming into this one with the better defense, the better offensive line significantly, and the better defense significantly. They're a little bit behind in the quarterback department to the average viewer. But in my personal opinion, Jalen Hurts is close enough to Patrick Mahomes at the moment. Then you think about what he has surrounding him. I think the Jalen Hurts-led Philadelphia Eagles are going to win the Super Bowl. I really do. And I'm not saying that because I'm a Kansas City Chiefs hater. I think the Kansas City Chiefs are a fine football team. But I really think that the Philadelphia Eagles are going to win this one. You have Patrick Mahomes at quarterback for the Chiefs, obviously, as most of you guys know. But it's just a team that I just don't think has a good enough defense. The Kansas City Chiefs are going to make this game a shootout to have a shot. But I think the Eagles' defense is going to get enough stops to keep their offense in this one. And I think the Eagles are going to do a good job of running the ball and just draining the clock, keeping the ball away from Patrick Mahomes and his Kansas City Chiefs-led offense. Because you got to think of the Super Bowl not only is about matchups, it's about game plan and strategy. And I think the Philadelphia Eagles are going to do a fine job of running the ball and taking it away from the Kansas City Chiefs and keeping it away from the Kansas City Chiefs. I bet Mahomes turns it over at least one time, and it's going to punish him for it. Because the Eagles are going to get ahead, and then they're going to run the ball. They're just going to run the ball the whole time and just drain the clock. They like playing from ahead. They like to get ahead with the pass and then run the ball to keep it away from you. And that's what they're going to do. And they're not only a team that can run the ball and keep it away from you, but they're a team that can run the ball and score while keeping it away from you. A lot of teams look to run the ball to keep it away, but they don't score. They don't convert. The Eagles convert. The Eagles score. And that's going to be a big difference. For the Chiefs, you must hope that Patrick Mahomes is as close to 100% as possible. And Travis Kelce has the greatest tight end performance in the Super Bowl that we have ever seen. That's the only way they win it in this one, in my personal thoughts. Travis Kelce, I'm not saying he can't do it, but it's a tall ask for anyone to have a game like that. He's capable of it. That's why we have to ask him of it, but it's not an easy ask. And then you shift sides to the Kansas City defense. Kansas City defense. If you want your team to win, it's going to start with the front four. But most importantly, Chris Jones and Frank Clark. Chris Jones needs to have an Aaron Donald-esque performance again. He needs to dominate the game like he did to the Bengals offensive line. But the challenge here, he's not facing a ragtag offensive line anymore. He's facing the best offensive line in football in the Philadelphia Eagles. And that's what's going to come down to. Can Chris Jones get enough pressure on Jalen Hurts? And then the other part two of this is, can the edge rushers of the Kansas City Chiefs stay disciplined enough to not allow Jalen Hurts to escape the pocket? A big thing you hear is you can't, go too deep in the pass rush. You got to stay even. Because when you drop beneath the quarterback, it allows the quarterback to get out of the pocket and run. So you got to stay even with him. You got to attack him vertical. And got to attack horizontal. You don't want to go too far behind Jalen Hurts because then he gets to slip out. You want to stay even with him while collapsing the pocket and kind of shrinking the pocket the whole way and not allow him to escape. What hurts these pocket passers in this league is when they go down their ends, get deep, and then surround them. But what allows the mobile quarterbacks, these younger quarterbacks, to succeed is when teams do that because it creates lanes and alleyways for them to sneak out of. So the Chiefs' defensive line needs to keep forcing the Eagles backwards, that offensive line backwards, until they pin Jalen Hurts in and eliminate those alleyways, and they must stay disciplined and stay in their gaps. They need to be gap sound. They need to be fundamentally sound. You hear that a lot. It's a lot of coach speak. But that's really the true case here. We need to stay fundamentally sound as the Kansas City Chiefs. You need to stay fundamentally sound. You need to win your one-on-one matchups and get after the quarterback. Simple enough. It sounds simple enough task, but it's not a hard one. If you do your job and execute, you'll do well. But it's very hard to keep it simple sometimes. And that's where it's going to come into. But as I said a moment ago, it is my prediction that the 14-3 Kansas City Chiefs fall to the 14-3 Philadelphia Eagles. I think the Philadelphia Eagles are going to win this one. I had the opportunity to watch this Philadelphia Eagles team live and in person when they took on the Colts. This Philadelphia Eagles team is something different. And the way Coach Sirianni of the Eagles has worked with an instrumental, influential run game, being able to get those short yard situations all the time. They've done a kind of a unconventional QB sneak where it looks like they're going to be, they line up in that prototypical like QB knee formation. You know, you got your guys down on the offensive line. You got them with their hands in the dirt. You got Jalen Hurts under center. And then you have a tight end and a running back right next to you. And you have your running back a little bit deeper. And you normally just do that. Snap, grab, knee. And you have those two guys next to you just in case something crazy happens with the snap and they fumble. So you can fall on it at the end of the game. And then you have your running back deep just in case some freak thing happens and the ball spills out behind you. But instead, what Nick Sirianni and his team are doing is they snap the ball. They have Jalen Hurts start going forward, and they have three guys get behind Jalen Hurts. Those the running back, tight end, fullback, tight end combo there right on his hip, and the running back from behind all run in and just shove him forward. And this play has been effective. They've gained 8, 9, 10 yards sometimes doing this. One of them just a yard or a couple inches. That's going to be influential. Can they stop that? Because the Eagles are able to get short, manageable situations. And honestly, the Eagles play a lot of 4-down football as well. If it's going to be a 4th and 1, the Eagles are going to go for it because they know they're going to get that 1 yard, that little QB shove, QB sneak play 90% of the time. It seems like they're getting it 90% of the time. They line it up, you're like, crap, they're going to get this one if you're going against the Eagles. So honestly, the Eagles are playing 4-down football in most situations as long as they're in the 40, their own 40, the 50. If they're in plus territory, they're definitely going for it. But even in their own territory, if they're near plus territory, they're going to go for it. So that's why I think the Eagles are going to win this one. Jalen Hurts in that run game are going to be too much, and that Eagles defense is going to get a stop or two and force a turnover against the Kansas City Chiefs, led by Patrick Mahomes. And this leads us into 4:50-ish, going in towards the second hour. We're going to take a 5-minute break, play some tunes for you guys, get some good music for you, take a quick break. When we get back from the break, we're going to be talking NFL free agency. We're going to be talking about the head coaching searches and the head coaching hires that have happened over this week, while also discussing what some teams should do here in free agency as well, moving towards the NFL draft in addition. It's Keeping It Real with Tyler Smith on Weestside 1.5 FM, Richmond's Public Radio. Stay with us. 91.5 FM, Richmond's Public Radio. I'm Tyler Smith, host of Keeping It Real with Tyler Smith. We're moving on here into the second hour. It is now 5 o'clock Eastern here in Richmond, Indiana. Still 19 degrees outside, mostly cloudy, a little bit chilly out there, a bit windy as well. If you're walking outside at night, definitely going to need that coat. Try and stay warm out there. It's going to be a brisk, cold night as well. It's going to be a pretty cold weekend as well. But in this second hour, we're going to do quite a few different things here. We're going to be talking the NFL free agency and the NFL offseason. We're going to be exploring teams from all over the league. We'll also focus on some of the more local teams, such as the Cincinnati Bengals and the Indianapolis Colts. The Indianapolis Colts are a team of quite controversy and concern and question marks right now. Jim Irsay and the Indianapolis Colts. Jim Irsay, the owner of the Indianapolis Colts, if you're not aware, and the GM, Chris Ballard, are going through an intricate and interesting NFL head coaching interview process and coaching search. They have interviewed several head coaches and a lot of candidates. It's going into what now, round 2, round 3 of the NFL coaching carousel with the Colts, just trying to find who the next guy is going to be. Previously, the interim head coach, Jeff Saturday, he was hired to be the interim during this season as they fired Frank Reich, who is now the head coach of the Carolina Panthers. But the Colts head coaching search has been quite interesting. It seems that the front office is bringing in new candidates, new people every single day to try and win this job. But what's going on the other side of things is Jim Irsay, he loves Jeff Saturday. So it's basically every day what's coming on, and according to rumors and reports, is who can impress Jim Irsay more than Jeff Saturday. In Jim Irsay's mind, he wants Jeff Saturday, but he keeps being told by everybody else not to hire Jeff Saturday. So he's like, fine, bring me someone who you think is going to be better than him. And that's what's happening right now. They're comparing everyone. Well, Jim Irsay is comparing everyone to Jeff Saturday. And Jeff Saturday is in the ring of honor of the Indianapolis Colts. He's a legend in the Indianapolis Colts. And he did a serviceable job as an interim head coach this year. You know, there are moments where he did not do well. Poor clock management, gave up the biggest comeback of all time in the NFL this year. But he's a guy who's been around the NFL for a long time and had a lot of success in the NFL. So you have to imagine eventually he might be able to figure it out, but he just doesn't have the experience under his belt yet. But there's several people who are big names for this job that have better experience and better qualifications almost than Jeff Saturday. Really, Jeff Saturday, the only thing he's got on the competition is the fact that he was an Indianapolis Colt, and Jeff Saturday is beloved by Jim Irsay. That's all he's got going for him, really. But you have all these other people as candidates now. You have a couple in-house candidates like Bubba Ventrone. He's the Colts special teams coordinator, and he's been there for 5 years. And he's routinely boasted as the league's top special teams coach. And he's a former player, great leader, and that's what kind of seems to be those categories for the Colts here. They want great leaders and great men to be in the head coaching position here. And the Colts head coaching job is one that really doesn't come available a lot. So I think that's what Jim Irsay is trying to have such an intricate process here alongside Chris Ballard, because they don't want the Colts to be one of these dumpster fire franchises where every year, every 2 years, they're hiring a new head coach. They want to find somebody and be done with this for the next 20 years, hopefully. And that's what the Colts are trying to do here. And really, this could be Chris Ballard, the GM, his last go-round. I was at the Colts and Eagles game, as I mentioned before the break, and I was up in the box, and I heard some words by Chris Ballard that I cannot repeat over the air about this loss and about the franchise and about the front office and about the coaching staff. It was along the lines of the same old Colts, da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da, and a bunch of other words that I cannot say. But he was very expressive and extremely, let's say, angry with what was going on in the front office and beneath him as well in the coaching staff and the coaching department of the Indianapolis Colts. And then the next candidate is Shane Steichen, the Philadelphia Eagles offensive coordinator. This could be a decent hire. OC of the Eagles, team that's in the Super Bowl. And this could be part of the reason why the coaching search is being drug out. Because you can't hire him as your head coach still, because he's still coaching and he has a Super Bowl on the line. So you have to imagine after a week of the Super Bowl. So the Super Bowl, we got that not this Sunday, but the next Sunday. So in almost 16-ish days, I believe, if I'm doing my quick math here right, about like that. So maybe here in 3 weeks, we might see if that's Shane Steichen's going to be the option here. That's why we might see him get hired. But he's an OC for the Eagles. He has Philly's offense running great. And he could really do some things. The Colts are a very suitable job to an extent because they have a lot of pieces on this team. But it's about, do you want to keep them? The offensive line underperformed. It was underwhelming this year. But they have a great offensive line with a bunch of high-level players such as Quentin Nelson. And you have one of the best running backs in the NFL in Jonathan Taylor. You have one of the best defensive players in Darius Leonard on the other side of things. And you have a couple of young defensive backs in the backfield, in the defensive secondary, in that backfield as well. So it's not like a horrible team. You're not walking into a horrible situation that needs to be rebuilt. And you have a lot of bit of flexibility as well. You have a decently high draft pick, and you can come in and pick your quarterback. And if I'm the Colts, I'm trading up, trying to get the number 1 overall pick and draft Bryce Young or CJ Stroud. I personally would go for Bryce Young, but a lot of people have the Colts projected to get Will Levis. And I think the Colts cannot draft Will Levis. I don't think Will Levis is going to be a great NFL prospect, in my personal opinion. I'd rather go with someone like a Bryce Young or a CJ Stroud, where a lot of people are on the same terms, like, yeah, they're going to be good. The only thing worrisome about Bryce Young is his height, but I'm not a guy who's worried about height all the time. If you can play ball, you can play ball. But CJ Stroud's your prototypical quarterback that you want to see as well. And if you go with either one of those guys and they're a bust in 3 or 4 years, no one can fault you for taking them. But if you pull Cleveland Browns, and draft like a Johnny Manziel way too early, when everyone's saying don't draft the kid, he's immature and not going to be able to handle it, that's a different story. When you go out and jump at somebody who's not as good for the position, that's when you get hit and hammered. No one's going to blame you for taking Bryce Young, who seems to be the overall number 1 selection no matter what. If you take him, no one's going to be mad at you if you end up seeing Bryce Young become a bust because you did what was supposed to be the right thing there. Then another option for the Colts, Ben Johnson. He's the offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. That Detroit Lions offense was humming this year. Could be a very interesting hire there as well. But the person I think who would be very well suited for this job and built for this job is Aaron Glenn. Aaron Glenn is a dark horse candidate. I don't think he'll get it, but he will be a great head coach in this league down the line. Aaron Glenn is a former defensive back, a great defensive back nonetheless. He was a strong defensive coordinator this year for the Lions. The Lions defense, I know you're going to say it, they rank dead last in the NFL. But Glenn is an extremely talented player, and is super smart. He's super smart and intellectual in this game and is a guy who commands respect. And I think he very well could do a lot of good things here. And he's also has an interesting background too. When you think about it, he was a guy who started off as a scout and has been a GM in some other lower level football leagues. So he's a guy who kind of knows the game. I mean, he also played the game for quite some time. And I think he could be a very interesting hire. I know Aaron Glenn, you see it on paper, their defense was horrible for the Lions, but he also didn't have a lot of talent around him. You know, probably the best player on the defensive side of the ball there for the Detroit Lions was rookie out of Michigan, Aiden Hutchinson. When you only have one star player and one good player, it's tough to do something. I'm not saying none of the players in the Detroit Lions are good on the defensive side of things. They're just not elite. They're not high level. You can take someone from every team in the NFL and they would probably start for the Lions at X, Y, and Z positions. They'd start all over the ball, except for maybe Aiden Hutchinson. So this Lions defense can improve if Aaron Glenn comes back next year as defensive coordinator. But I think Aaron Glenn would be my choice as a hire here for the Indianapolis Colts almost, if you don't get some of these other guys that we mentioned earlier. And the name that always going to come up is Eric Bieniemy, offensive coordinator, Kansas City Chiefs. But I hate to say it, but he's been a guy who's been interviewed a ton for head coaching jobs over the last 5-6 years, you know, of the Kansas City Chiefs' success. And he's never been hired. And I wonder why that is. There's a lot of reports out there saying a lot of different things, so there's just a lot of speculation, a lot of people taking shots in the dark, so no one really knows why he's not being hired. But he's definitely a smart mind. But a lot of people are also looking Is it really Bieniemy or is it Andy Reid? And they don't know what that is, and taking a flyer because you don't know if it's him. The downside, if you're the Indianapolis Colts, of hiring a defensive coach is you need to get a coordinator on the offensive side of things. And you need a defensive coordinator as well, but a defensive head coach is going to have his hands much more involved in the defensive side of the ball. So if you hire a guy like Aaron Glenn, you need to go out and get a good OC, offensive coordinator. But what stinks about having a really good offensive coordinator is every 2 years, they're going to get poached. They're that good. They'll be getting a head coaching job somewhere. So every 2 years, it's almost like a restart with the offense. We have to cycle through again. So that's why you see a lot of teams go for these offensive-minded head coaches, because you can go out and get a defensive coordinator and move on with your life. You can go out and get a guy who fits the scheme, or you can just promote an assistant. On the offensive side of things, it doesn't really work out like that. Offense is a little bit harder to develop a system and a process. Whereas on the defensive side of thing, once you know your system and know your process, you can step up to the plate and do pretty well. Play calling is the biggest thing to learn. And I think offensive play calling is much harder to learn than defensive play calling. And that's why you're going to see the Colts, in my opinion, go for an offensive-minded head coach. And I think it's going to be Jeff Saturday being rehired, or you're going to end up seeing Shane Steichen. If I give my top four, I'd go Jeff Saturday is most likely to get the job. Then you have Shane Steichen at number 2. Then you have Bubba Ventrone at number 3. Special teams coordinator, guys that have been in the building and done a good job. The only downside of that is, you have to get coordinators that have called plays before on offense and defense for him. But he's highly respected inside the organization, so you have to imagine his name's up on that list. And then at number 4, you have Aaron Glenn. And Aaron Glenn is number 4. And then his counterpart for the Detroit Lions on the offensive side of things, Ben Johnson's probably number 5. But the Indianapolis Colts, in my personal opinion, need to make a massive move. I mean a massive move this offseason to trade up and draft an elite quarterback in a guy named C.J. Stroud and or Bryce Young. That's what really needs to happen here. But as we move on, here's some trades that we need to watch out for this offseason. A big name is Aaron Rodgers. For better or for worse, you hear Aaron Rodgers' name in the media quite a bit. But Aaron Rodgers is an elite, talented quarterback, arguably one of the best talented quarterbacks in the league in all of NFL history. He has his off-the-field issues, off-the-field antics and whatnot sometimes that a lot of people are going to blame him for. But I'm not a big Aaron Rodgers hater. I like Aaron Rodgers a bit, And Aaron Rodgers is nonetheless a talented football player. And a recent hire for the New York Jets, they got an offensive coordinator by the name of Nathaniel Hackett. Nathaniel Hackett was previously the head coach of the Denver Broncos. He got fired, but what's coming out a lot in league circles now is he was fired not because of his poor coaching, but more of Russell Wilson was just so bad, and they just need to save face and just try and get a fresh start. Nathaniel Hackett's getting the axe, but it's not really his fault. So Aaron Rodgers, who was formerly OC before Matt LaFleur was the head coach, they had Nathaniel Hackett. Nathaniel Hackett was with him and Matt LaFleur. Created what was called the gold zone, where, short yards, third down area, red zone area, that they would succeed. So that's a man that is very familiar with Aaron Rodgers, and Aaron Rodgers is very familiar with. The bigger question if you're in the New York Jets is Aaron Rodgers going to stick around a lot? And a lot of people are saying it's going to be up to Aaron Rodgers, where he goes. But I think the bigger question is, do the Green Bay Packers want to move on yet? Move on from the Aaron Rodgers process. And that's what's going to come down to. I think Aaron Rodgers has made it clear enough on several platforms that he wants to be in Green Bay, but he's not held to Green Bay. He's open to the idea of moving on, but he would prefer to stay in Green Bay. But if you're the Green Bay Packers, you had a situation like this almost 15 years ago, you think, between Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. You draft a young quarterback when you have a guy playing at an all-pro level. And it's just about when does he get his chance. And that's exactly what the Green Bay Packers did again. They draft Jordan Love in the first round. They trade up to draft Jordan Love in the first round. Then Aaron Rodgers goes on to win 2 COVID MVPs. And Jordan Love is kind of waiting in the backside. Just, will I get my shot? Who knows? But the Jordan Love era, if you're the Green Bay Packers, has to begin, if you think. You put a first-round pick on him, and you have to imagine that, like, we need to see what we got in our guy. But I'm also one, if it was me, I'm trying to bring Aaron Rodgers back. I know we haven't had a lot of success, but it's not because of Aaron Rodgers. We need to bring Rodgers back, and I need to build a team around him. I need to build a defense. I need to get him weapons, and they just haven't done that of late. And that's what makes me think that they're going to move on from Aaron Rodgers. Do I think that's the right decision for the Green Bay Packers to do? No. But they've done it before. And they've already laid out all the precedent over the last few seasons that they're wanting to move on from Aaron Rodgers. And I think that's what we're going to see here. And I've also think we've seen some regret by the Packers because they don't know if Jordan Love is ready, but they have to find out. So they might move on here this offseason. And Aaron Rodgers is most likely not going to the 49ers. That's been a big rumor. And he actually got asked about it at the Pebble Beach Pro-Am, which is a golf tournament full of celebrities and athletes and stars. And he said, yeah, 49ers not happening. So if he gets traded, it's most likely going to be to the New York Jets, which is a big flyer out there. And if he gets traded to the New York Jets, they are instantly in the AFC Championship hunt, in my personal thoughts. Because you have Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets, Joe Burrow and the Bengals, Kansas City Chiefs, Mahomes, and probably the Dolphins, as those guys out there that could probably be the best teams in the AFC. And then we move over to another guy who's been a little questionable, Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson, what are you going to do? What are we going to do with him? He was hurt. Does he want to come back to the does he want to come back to the Baltimore Ravens after how everything went down this year? I don't know if he will or wants to. So Lamar Jackson is a big question mark around the offseason here. And there's a lot of discussion about the franchise tag. There's 2 franchise tags now. And there's always been, but you just don't hear about it a lot. There's the exclusive franchise tag, which is a little bit of a higher price, but the team gets that player no matter what. Then there's the non-exclusive franchise tag. The non-exclusive franchise tag has been kind of talked about a lot because a lot of people didn't really know is a thing. But the non-exclusive franchise tag is you pay your player, you give them the non-exclusive franchise tag. He is yours. He's your player. You save some money. You don't have to pay him as much. This is what you see a lot of teams do with players at less impactful or important positions. Pat McAfee actually broke it down with Ian Rappaport on his show. Pat McAfee was the punter of the Indianapolis Colts. He received a non-exclusive franchise tag. An non-exclusive franchise tag means they're franchise tagged to that team. They're paid at a rate determined by the NFL for 1 season, fully guaranteed. But the non-exclusive means any team can trade for that player, and they get them no matter what, if they give up 2 first-round draft picks. And then once their 2 first-round draft picks are submitted to that team, they get traded. That team who gave up the 2 first-rounders gets the player, and then they're free to negotiate a more long-term deal if they would like to. But if you're giving up 2 first-round draft picks, you're most likely trying to sign a more long-term deal. You don't want to give away 2 first-round draft picks for 1 season with a player. And that's going to be something to watch out for. Will the Baltimore Ravens put a exclusive franchise tag, which means that he's all the Baltimore Ravens and he just needs to sign it, or he can't play? And then there's the non-exclusive where they can get 2 first-round picks for him. So here are your 2 avenues if you're the Baltimore Ravens. You sign Lamar Jackson to an exclusive, and then you trade him for more than 2 first-round draft picks. But that'll be a little bit tougher sell because some teams are not going to want to do that, which I think is silly. I think you trade for Lamar Jackson if you can get him. You give up whatever you can. But if they go with a non-exclusive franchise tag, there are going to be teams chomping at the bit to land him, such as the Detroit Lions, the Carolina Panthers, anybody in this league, the Atlanta Falcons. Anyone would improve by having Lamar Jackson. There are only a handful of teams out there where I wouldn't take Lamar Jackson. So it's definitely a big story to watch out for this offseason. Now we're going to talk more about the 49ers. I know we've talked about them quite a bit today because they were in the NFC Championship game. They had a strong season. But Trey Lance might be on the trading block because the 49ers just saw Brock Purdy go out and ball. And they're not sure with Trey Lance, but they know what they got in Brock Purdy to an extent. But it's just something to look out for. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but the UCL injury Brock Purdy suffered in the NFC Championship game is going to complicate some stuff. Before the injury, he was going to be QB1 next year. But with that injury, Brock Purdy might be questionable to be ready by training camp in week 1. So Trey Lance might be sticking around. But with that said, Trey Lance is a starting caliber NFL quarterback, and a lot of teams might be looking to trade for him. The 49ers could go out and sign a veteran quarterback just to guide the ship until Brock Purdy's ready. But don't see the 49ers shop Trey Lance. They will listen to Trey Lance, but they're not going to go out offering Trey Lance. That's the big thing to remember here. The 49ers will listen to teams, inquire about Trey Lance, but they're not going to go out and shop him. And if I had to give Trey Lance a landing spot, if he were to be traded, I don't think he will be traded, but if he were to be traded, watch out for the New Orleans Saints. And maybe number 2, the Carolina Panthers. I think those are going to be the 2 potential most likely landing spots for Trey Lance. And we've already spoke about Aaron Rodgers on the move and the Las Vegas Raiders and Derek Carr. There's a lot of people saying the Las Vegas Raiders are going to trade Derek Carr. But here's why I say Derek Carr does not get traded. Derek Carr's contract situation is extremely unique for this situation. He has a high cap hit, and a cap hit means how much a team has to pay a player, that guaranteed money. So if the Las Vegas Raiders were to trade Derek Carr, a team would be receiving Derek Carr, and that team, in their eyes, is thinking Derek Carr is not worth his cap hit or the amount of money we have to guarantee to him. So a lot of teams don't want to trade for Derek Carr. Or if they trade for Derek Carr, expect this trade to be worth almost nothing. Like the Raiders will get almost nothing in return. But what is the most likely option and most likely thing to happen in my thinking here, and talking with some of my sources I have around the league, just shooting out quick text, emails, and just asking around and just listening to people, Derek Carr most likely will get cut by the Las Vegas Raiders before March 15th. He most likely will be cut and then signed right away by a new team at a better price. So Derek Carr is going to be on the move, but teams are going to want to get him, Derek Carr, at their price. And Derek Carr is a good quarterback in this league. And there's kind of a sneaky, quiet one out there, Jalen Ramsey, cornerback of the Los Angeles Rams, might be on the move. The Los Angeles Rams might need to move them because the Los Angeles Rams are in a dangerous spot with their salary cap. They are strapped for money. They went out and they spent like crazy, and it paid out. It panned out. It worked. You got that Super Bowl ring, but they're sold to the devil in a sense. They gave up all their draft picks. They gave up all their money to get one ring. This year we saw it kind of collapse just due to injuries and not having enough depth around the field. So I think Jalen Ramsey is going to be moving on from the Los Angeles Rams and be finding a new team. I'm not sure where he will go, but expect the Rams to get a fair amount of draft compensation while also clearing their books. Jalen Ramsey, most likely, if I had to give him a couple landing spots, I'm not sure where, but a couple that do come to mind off the top of my head could be the Cincinnati Bengals, which would be shocking in a sense, but also extremely positive. The Bengals are going to have about $50 million in salary cap room. They can get rid of Eli Apple. So the Bengals could give away Eli Apple or one of their other younger corners that are pretty solid, and maybe a draft pick or two to land Jalen Ramsey. And then I'd just have to give him another landing spot. I'll give you two more landing spots for Jalen Ramsey. I would say the Minnesota Vikings or the Kansas City Chiefs. And here's why. The Minnesota Vikings in the NFC, they have an extremely talented offense. They did well this year, but their defense hurt them a lot. Their point differential was negative, even though they had an extremely positive record and were a high seed in the playoffs this year. Their defense hurt them, and their defense didn't allow them to succeed to what they expected or wanted to have. If you get Jalen Ramsey, you get one of the best cornerbacks in the league, in addition to a really good offense. Jalen Ramsey allows that team to improve significantly overnight, which is why I think that might be a move. And then the Kansas City Chiefs. You might be thinking, Tyler, why are the Kansas City Chiefs going to go out and make a move for Jalen Ramsey? They're in the Super Bowl right now. They have a chance to win. And here's why. There's no such thing as too much talent in the NFL. The Kansas City Chiefs have gotten destroyed by the Cincinnati Bengals of late. I know they just beat them last weekend, but the Bengals have proven their kryptonite. It's in their secondary. It's with these young corners that they have who are doing a good job. They're not playing bad, but they're just young corners, and they're not top 5. They're not top 10. They're not top 15. They're not top 25. They're barely top 32. They're probably 26 to 40 range. There are two corners that they have. If you go out and land Jalen Ramsey, you're landing a top 5 corner no matter what. And that bolsters your defense significantly. And now you put the 26, arguably probably like 26 to 32, your original cornerback 1, CB1 to CB2, cornerback 2. And now you have two top tier corners. And then you have an elite third corner. And that's what you need in this league. You need to have an elite corner at the position number 3. And then you have to have good at number 2 and number 1, obviously. But the more good corners you can have in this pass-heavy league, the more equipped you are to win. And the Kansas City Chiefs could do it. The Kansas City Chiefs want to win. They want to do whatever it takes to win. So that's why I can see them moving on. And then lastly, I'd say here was what we got going on right now. DeAndre Hopkins. This is the story we're kind of head out on today. DeAndre Hopkins, D-Hop. One of the best receivers in this league, an extremely underpaid wide receiver as well. He signed his new contract a while back and was a really good contract for wide receivers at the moment. But the league's had a completely different shift to where now like wide receivers getting paid almost quarterback-esque money with guys like Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, Mike Williams, and all these guys, Devontae Adams, Tyreek Hill. Like those guys are getting broken off and paid significant amounts of money. And DeAndre Hopkins sees that. DeAndre Hopkins is as good as those guys. He's in that conversation. He's going to be a wide receiver 1 next year somewhere. And he wants to trade out of Arizona. He's over Kyler Murray. He just wants to get to a new landing spot. And if I have to give you a spot for DeAndre Hopkins to get traded into, I think DeAndre Hopkins most likely is going to be traded somewhere where they need a star wide receiver. And it's going to be the Chicago Bears and New England Patriots. And if he stays out of those two teams, it's the Baltimore Ravens if they keep Lamar Jackson. But overall, the NFL slate has been quite hectic, and we're going to preview on the next week's show Eagles taking on the 49ers. Until next time, I'm Tyler Smith, host of Keeping It Real. I got the Oldie Show coming on next. Have a good one.